Friday, guys.
How's everybody doing?
How you doing? Yeah, good, man. Tim, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be here with you too.
Yeah, Tim, we're going to get real down and dirty with some fun topic today that Tom and I absolutely love, and I can't wait to break this open. But thanks for coming. It's a Friday, a little gloomy of a Friday afternoon or morning here. I don't know how it is where you're at, but I can't really do much outside today.
Yeah, hot and muggy where I'm at.
Yeah,
hot and muggy. Oh yeah, no. Yeah, that's the thing about out here in the mountains, man. We're at 2,500 feet, and all of a sudden it gets like 10 degrees colder, and it's just.
Well, that's kind of nice because it's miserable, and I'm in the basement.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh, that's unfortunate. Cool. Well, hey Tim, like I said, welcome. Let's get the formalities out of the way here real quick. Tell us something about yourself and how you got here, and we'll just jump in right after that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, Matt. Good to be here with you and Tom. Yeah, I'm on career 2.5, Matt. Early on, I was a technology executive running consulting and services practices, but got to the point where I didn't feel that was really providing helping a benefit to people. I've kind of changed my mind back on technology at this point in time, how it really can help people. But at that point, I said, look, this really isn't doing anything for people. So I took that services background and ran an in-home care for the elderly for 8 years, operated in 3 states, New York, Connecticut, and New Jersey. And that did give me great benefit, helping people cope with their challenges and seeing adult children cope with their aging parents. But I rarely got the opportunity to see people get better. And so that's what led me on the path. I said, look, even for those people, and I say even those, because they had given up on themselves in terms of thriving. Families had given up, even healthcare providers had given up on them thriving. These were people from 78 to 90 predominantly. And I said, even they could get better intuitively. So that set me on a search for technologies, approaches, and methods that could help those people thrive again and others. And that's what got me here to what we're dealing with today on the PEMF.
So that's interesting. So when you were in the aging community like that, what was it? Pretty much comfort until they're dead kind of environment, or was it like care? It seems like less about curing things or making it better. It seems more about just sort of making it not so miserable to die.
We did do some end of life care, palliative care. We didn't specialize in that, but I guess my old college wrestling coach used to say you got to compensate if you're hurt and doing things of that nature. So that home care predominantly was helping people compensate, helping them cope. So someone have trouble, now they had trouble driving, they couldn't drive anymore. So how do you get them around? They might have trouble bathing or even dressing. You help them with that. I was medical in New York, so that got a little deeper. Yeah. But in New Jersey and Connecticut, it was more what they call that personal care or companion care. And that's what it is. It's very important, even that, if you've got someone in a snowstorm that can't get to the bathroom unless you get somebody there and get them out of bed, that's pretty important. So it's important to help them live at home or even live in assisted living, bringing to do that. But it's a cope. My mental capabilities are down. I'm fall risk. I need help dressing, bathing, things of that nature. So you're helping people cope.
Yeah, so I can see that that's not probably always the most, brightest place to look at humans, right? Like they're not always maybe in their best representation of themselves.
Well, it's such a weird place, right?
It's a weird place, yeah.
And often you get a little bit of both. It's great when a caregiver or your agency can work with people because it'll change their whole mental attitude. You'll see that some people aren't in their best state. They're depressed, they're angry, they're things of that nature. But then you start giving them very good care. You see that brightness come back to them.
That's cool.
You see that interaction come back to them in that regard.
So when you said you loop back to technology a little bit now, it feels maybe like this was the genesis of that. Like, you see like technology can maybe help move that needle further, faster.
Well, that's one point. So I looked at, and so yes, this is a different type of technology we deal with now. I was looking at this, so how can you help these people get better? How can you get them thriving? How can, get them off that sick bed? Because intuitively, I think I'd been exposed to Chinese medicine a little bit when I was a heavy duty Chinese martial artist out in San Francisco. Even through some things I'd done as wrestling and things of that nature, I'd look at these people and I'd say, there's even at 75, 80 plus, you should still be able to develop some muscle. So it led me on the path to say, what can I find to help these people get better? And that's where I had actually been teamed up with a concierge personal trainer who operated in 5 states. And somebody brought this PEMF technology to him and said, look, I think this could be good for your business. He said, I don't have time to look at it. Can you look at it for a stem? And I said, yes. And that's where I really saw, I said, wow, this is phenomenal technology that is, it's in the IT world, we used to call it vaporware, but in the medical world, it's not.
I get you.
Yeah, so it's not vaporware, it's not snake oil. It's got science behind it. It's got studies behind it. It's got a tracker behind it. And so then when I was using that and started getting that into people and helping them use it, I saw some phenomenal things happen. So then I branched out from the elderly to others because it applies not only to them, but to, I say, anyone who is really interested in their health and wellness and their longevity owes it to themselves to make an educated and informed decision on whether or not they should bring PEMF technology into their lives for their health and wellness regime.
All right,
and that's
Tim,
actually
you said so much there, man. I got one question before we get into the PEMF. Yeah. What style Chinese martial arts?
Fuck, I was going to ask the same thing.
I actually studied 3 styles.
Okay.
Over course of time. Started out with Chinese Kempo.
Okay.
And then I was in college in California. Then I moved to Chicago. It's a little known style. Old timers in Chicago will remember the Green Dragon Society. And so it was Green Dragon Society, but something called Chi Dao Chuan, which actually fell underneath it, repository. And it was actually started over in Macau and did that. Then I went back to California and we could really get into that. It was like, I'll give you a short version. I was walking through Chinatown and I saw some people practicing in the park in Chinatown. And I watched for a while, and the guy teaching them asked him if I knew anything. He said, yeah, and demonstrated a little bit. And they clap. And then he had one of his students spar with me, and I beat his student. And then he came out, and I could do nothing against him. And I said, I want to study with you. And he tried to send me away, and I had to keep asking to come back with like the movie.
Old school.
Finally, and he actually was great. He's a grandmaster. You can look him up on Google. Very well respected. A guy named Garrett G. And he actually has 2 styles: a grandmaster in Wing Chun, which if you hung around with Garrett, you learned a little Wing Chun, but that wasn't my main style. Also, there's a Wudong Kung Fu system, which has some very ancient styles in it, Pagua in it, but also has 5 styles of Tai Chi, something called Learn Yi. So it's very, very sophisticated system.
Internal stuff. That's great.
Yeah. I've learned from him.
Yeah, I'm a Japanese guy, man. All this is like literally a foreign language to me.
His last teacher, clearly not the same systems, but those internal styles, Bagua, Tai Chi, Xing Yi, all of those are internal stuff that are very, close to my heart as an acupuncturist too. I mean, that was the main stuff I studied.
Yep. And his father, who's unfortunately no longer with us, a guy named Peter Kim Ho Chu. They were just phenomenal. People literally came from around the world to study with them. So that was.
You know what I love about martial artists in general, and I think this is what drew me. I have a 2nd degree black belt in Japanese jiu-jitsu, not the cage version. But nothing against that, but I took one class at a Gracie dojo in Newark, New Jersey. I was like, nope, hard pass. I'm not in this for the sports. This is not my vibe. But what I like about it is you talk to anybody on any style and anywhere, and it's like, I feel like people who study martial arts, and maybe it's because of martial arts, maybe it's their personality, but I feel like when you start getting into things like PEMF, for example, or any kind of like research or health related stuff, there's like a completely different connection to that than people who don't have that background.
It's a
right?
cultivation. I think I would use the word cultivation. I think that's what we're trying to do, in various aspects of our life. So, for martial arts, seriously, that's an endeavor, right? When we do something for health as a practice, and Tim, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth here, but you're trying to cultivate your health, right? So it's the same, you develop this certain mindset of looking at things and analyzing them and studying them at a different level.
Absolutely.
So Tim, when you were jumping into PEMF, was this experiential or was it data driven, or like what was your onboarding?
Yeah, did somebody throw you on a pad?
Yeah, like were you like, spoiler alert, mine was like, hey, wrap this thing around your body and watch what happens. Like, that was my onboarding. There was no sort of like research at all. Like, I mean, that came later, but for me, it was a very abrupt and acute introduction.
Yeah, so for me, it came kind of the end of the direction because I'd been been asked by sort of my colleague at the time to take a look at it. So at that point, I lived, I was associated, lived around a number of doctors and actually had them take a look at this. And it passed, none of them leaped out to put it in their practices or anything, but they said, this passes our kind of sniff test on it.
Right.
So then I went out and got someone to give one to me for a month. And I started testing it out on people. I did a little bit myself. So I tested it out on people with various things. Blood pressure problems, arthritis, people with arthritis problems, people with the name is escaping me, right? The carpal tunnel syndrome and things of that nature. And so I just used it on for a month on a number of other people, and actually surprisingly found some changes that people could see quickly on it. And I said, all right. So that's when I kind of jumped on it, moved into it. Then I said, well, look, I'm out there and I've spent this money to get one of these to be able to demo and take around. I might as well use it myself. And that's when I started experiencing a number of changes in myself, from cognitive function to, I was also related to your jiu-jitsu a little bit. I was also a collegiate wrestler, so I got ripped up knees and arthritis in the martial arts, and arthritis had kind of set in on them. So muscle knots and scar tissue had built up. I saw it broke that up and improved my range of motion. And one knee took the constant swelling down. So it began a combination. I came from the data side, analysis side, to running my own little non-gold standard studies on people, to then using it on myself. So from all three angles.
Tim, that's awesome. Yeah. Can you get can we back it up a little bit and just talk a little bit about what it is and how it kind of works?
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So PEMF stands for Pulsed Electromagnetic Field Therapy. And so it's using various, it's using a magnetic field as a carrier predominantly. In some cases, PEMF, that magnetic field itself is therapeutic, but oftentimes it's used to carry signals to the body. And the body understands. Often, many of them are maybe mat-based, coil-based, but they come in contact with the body. They pass the field through the body, and a signal's buried in it. The body understands it, and responds to it, and it responds to it at the, like we were talking at the martial arts level, whether it's the external ones still affect internally, the internal ones. It's generating the electricity and the power of the body. It works really at that electrical level of the body to stimulate processes like blood flow, like bone formulation, metabolic detox, triggers off a lot of things in the body electronically, and it just brings a world of benefit to the body and to the environment.
And so, like, somebody had explained it to me one time, that it in a way, they said, basically, if you think about, your cells all clumped up on one another, right, and you just sort of slowed down, whether that's from injury or age or, chronic, whatever, it vibrates at a point where you can kind of create space between those things and bring nutrient and blood flow and, perfusion into spaces that might not have had optimized flow before that. I mean, I guess the question really is around the urban legend of PEMF, right? People who are in there, like, I don't know if that's true or not. It sounds like pseudo true, right? It feels feels semi-legitimate. Like how much of this is like real and how much of this is sort of.
Well, I'll give you an example. I was dealing with a doctor in Greenwich, Connecticut, and been named a top doc. And when I first started talking to that person, they said that. It said, this sounds like snake oil. I'm very conventional here. And luckily, I got him to see the doctor because I had taken care of one of their patients from a home care standpoint. So they
had a reputation with them, yeah.
And then I said, but yeah, will you look at the science with me? Will you look at the studies with me? Said yes. And after I left and demoed it, that person actually called to Memorial Sloan Kettering and found out that they were actually doing a study on one of the.
Wow.
So to that point,
it was a Sloan Kettering study on cancer then.
Yeah, it was related to some form of cancer. I don't know if I ever knew. I didn't really ask what form. I knew why. I knew she had talked about a patient that had cancer at the time. So I knew the form the person had, but I don't know if that was what the study was on. But if you look at PEMF, and that's why I often call this a well-known secret. Why? For the very question you just asked, Matt. If you go and look at the science of frequency medicine and the effect of frequencies on the body, been studied clear back at least since World War II. The Japanese looked at it, spread to Russia, then it spread to other places and take a look at it. So people have known that frequencies affect people. Tesla created a PEMF-like machine clear back in 1900 and talked about it with doctors and shows the effect of electricity, which is another part of electromagnetism, and effects it had on it. Then you look at it, NASA actually has a version of PEMF. I think it's on the International Space Station to help maintain the health of astronauts in space. You get away from the Earth's atmosphere, what happens? Muscle loss, bone loss, blood flow slows down. So you look at it. So I'll try and truncate this a little bit, but to your point, if one goes out and looks at and just Googles there's some good sources say, I'm checking myself on this, but some good sources say that there are over 20,000 articles, papers written on PEMF. Now, while I check myself, I don't think you could find out 20,000 of those by Googling. But what you could do, or one could do, is go up to PubMed.gov. I still like the government for some things.
PubMed's a great site.
PubMed's a great site. We use it all the time here. Yeah.
There you go. Gold standard studies, double-blind, placebo-controlled, peer review. And I did this for a discussion, probably.
All except if you're Terrence Howard. He doesn't get it.
We had our own Terrence Howard on here. It was great.
Yeah.
I did this for a discussion probably 2 months ago now, and I put in PEMF, and over 800 items came back.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so this is stuff that's been very well studied from all kinds of things like with MS, chronic regional pain syndrome, tinnitus, all the itises like I talked about that.
Yeah,
reducing inflammation, right? Yeah.
I was just going to say summarily, I mean, when you go through, whenever I hear anybody list out things that it cures or helps, you could really quickly, if you're paying attention, see what the trend is. And usually it's an inflammation thing. I'm in the cannabis space 20 years now. And, CBD, when it hit the market, it cures everything under the sun. But all the things that they say it cures was all inflammation.
Inflammation,
like you said, all the itises, right? You're like, all right, well, I mean, if it can be swollen, this thing could help, right?
So Tim, full disclosure, I literally had a discussion with my office manager yesterday about possibly bringing in PEMF because that's kind of what my clinic aims at is inflammation. Now she said, isn't that the same as a TENS unit?
No.
And I said electric stim and electromagnetic fields are different, but I'm not a physicist. So I left it at that. Can you speak a little bit maybe deeper to that?
Yeah, and I will.
You mean deeper than that nugget of wisdom, Tom? Yes,
they're different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think this is what I said.
And one follow-up comment to that. So it helped your inflammation, right? Of course, it's key to longevity, but it's also a process that starts off a lot of the diseases that you can help with. But also, you look at PEMF. One thing for Nuck mentioned, it was first approved by the FDA clear back in the late 70s and early 80s after work coming out of Columbia University. I think it was a guy named Dr. Andrew Bassett, who showed that it sped the healing of bone fractures that weren't responding to other types of care. So it even works at that level. Now on the E-stem, I often, to an extent, E-stem works from the outside in and is localized. Right, so it'll stimulate muscle contraction. It'll stimulate some local blood flow, and so it'll work to help that. Absolutely. PEMF will work from the inside out, and it will hit even the nitrogen monoxide system, which is very key to inflammation and drive that.
Yeah.
It will help with one of the things the FDA has said, well, FDA itself has said it can help with is muscle strength, but it does that from inside out and working in that way. So it'll go much beyond. It's more it helps with systemic
yeah,
inflammation and triggers off, and through that part of that by triggering off that body's whole system and approach to handling inflammation, and it'll even work at a cellular versus like stem out and contracting muscles, forcing things out. It'll work at the cellular level, as Matt talked about earlier, to kind of free things up. So you can get metabolic waste out, you can get inflammation out, and things of that nature. So.
Yeah, interesting. And so I guess I just want to touch on a little bit of a hot button issue here, the longevity. You know, we've used that on this call even a few times.
Right.
When it comes to these sort of claims, or sort of, I guess, not necessarily claims, that's a loaded word, but when somebody says this helps with longevity, I mean, in my mind, my stupid Luddite brain, right, I say, well, if I'm less inflamed, then that means my body could just work better. And if I could work better, then my nutrition is better uptake. Like, you know, if I'm on medications, they work better. And like, you know, it doesn't take a genius to follow the bouncing ball and be like, well, that means you'll probably live longer. Now, is it the PMF doing that? Is it the vitamins I'm taking that are working better? Is it any of the above? I don't know. But I guess I was curious, is there anything outside of just general makes my body do better things that has been associated back to PMF that's on the longevity front?
A couple of things. And one, I'm with you, and I'm glad you caught that, because people always ask about longevity, and I see all these promises of longevity. I like to say with PEMF, and glad you caught me on that, so I can say this time, that it improves the odds of longevity. There's nothing I've seen studied that says, you know, people that use PEMF for 30 years outlive people by XYZ. But then to your point, one of the things that is often found in those blue zones around the world where people live longer with less is that they have good microcirculation. What is PEMF? What is one of the things PEMF? So the microvasculation, most people look at the heart and arteries and veins and say this is circulation, but that makes up, I think it's 24 or 26% of the whole cardiovascular system. The other 76 or 74% is capillary, small vessels, the last mile of the veins. So you think if somebody's got heart problem with an artery, you know, what are they just happening at those capillaries? And drugs usually don't work at that level. Part of what PMF does is help that circulation at that level. And so you maintain, so that's when you start getting direct and indirect benefit from it. You talk about if you're eating right, now those nutrients can get delivered to the cells, better oxygen gets to those cells, so they work better, so it uptakes better. If you're on medication, it's the same thing, the power of that. It also, a lot of athletes use, and a lot of sports teams, individual athletes and pro-level sports teams use PEMF. Use it for recovery, but also to train harder, longer, and recover faster. So what does that mean? Well, that enables your exercise. You can exercise more. You can get more out of it. You can recover faster from it. So that's what I do a lot of work with. I used to do a lot with current athletes. Now I kind of moved into retired athletes and work with them. But still, I say it helps you across the spectrum of what an athlete needs. But that same spectrum is what a person needs to age well and hopefully live longer. better sleep will help. It's been shown to help with sleep. That nutrition, right? Distribution, uptake of that, muscle strength, stamina, mental clarity. So yes, there's a lot. Yes, so there is more than just directly that it does from the body. We talk about the bone growth with women and others. Osteopenia as you age, making you more likely to fractures and exposure to other things. So if you've done something now that can support that bone production problem, it helps both with the cleaning out of old bones, the stuff that cleans out the old bones, builds the new ones, but also there's keys of modulation of what happened. It helps, been shown to help with that control. So because of that vibration we talked about, because of what it stimulates in the body, there's a lot of things to say that it improves the odds of longevity. And then almost as importantly to some people is it improves the health span, right? What if I live to be 100, but I'm sick for those 40 years of it?
What's the point? Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's interesting about the, when you talk about this, and I think this is why, and I always laugh when people say, especially, you can imagine in doing this show, I get a lot of people that I talk to, family members in particular, that are like, you're just a little nuts. Like, this stuff is crazy. There's no studies on this, right? And I know I'm not saying there's not.
Anybody that says that doesn't even know where to look for studies.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying?
But it's more than that. Like, in order for me to study this, think about the cascade of absurdity that would have to happen, right? Like one of the things somebody once told, like, we were talking about age markers, and one of them was grip strength, right? And you have that, what is it? Not a goinometer, but whatever the grip strength tester is. And I said, how the hell does that indicate longevity? And the answer was so low tech stupid. I couldn't even answer. They're like, if you fall down the stairs and you can grab the handrail, you're not going to die. And so if you don't have good grip strength, you can physically not do that, which means your chances of breaking a hip, which is where I was going with this,
exponentially higher. Yeah.
Is exponentially higher. So just playing the odds, if you have good grip strength, that bodes well for you falling down stairs. And now you layer that on to like this technology that can help grow bones better. And it's like, how the hell do you even test that? Like, it would be literally impossible.
Well, even the longevity component, you would need a long cohort study of like 50, 60 years, and cohort studies to like eliminate the co-founding factors. You need that N to be 10,000, 20,000, 100,000 to have good data, because you don't know, like, you get 50 people and 25 of them are heavy smokers and the other 25 are heavy drinkers. Yep. And you may not see the results. And then is it the device not working? Is it people with bad lifestyle choices?
Right.
Bad lifestyle. I'm not judging that. I shouldn't say bad, but less healthy.
Different lifestyle choices. Yes.
And as much I'm a fan of studies, and like I said, we went back to PubMed.gov, and there's a lot of good stuff up there. But I also know those studies have, as you were talking to in some ways, the studies have to be ran well. I saw one that said, PEMF showed nothing in terms of recovery for athletes. But in that one, luckily, kind of showed the protocol was being used. Well, I looked at the protocol was being used, and I said, well, there's no reason. There's no wonder why it didn't show that, because what I've been doing with some Navy SEAL candidates, with athletes, is a whole different approach. It was irrefutable that they were getting better recovery.
Right. Yeah, and the people will also argue that too. They'll say, well, of course, a Navy SEAL isn't even in contention to be a Navy SEAL unless they have a certain baseline to operate from, and that baseline is very different than mine, for example, right? And I don't consider myself an unhealthy guy, but I'm sure as shit not a Navy SEAL.
But I would argue, Matt, that those two extremes, those high level athletes and those very sick people, are going to be the first two to notice those small changes.
Right. Yeah.
And on the high level end, is it jumping just a fraction of an inch higher? Is it taking a tenth of a second off my lap? Is it and then the very sick people are like, look, I stood up today.
Yes.
And that could rock their world.
Yep. Absolutely.
So the middle of the road people might go, that was nice.
Tim,
and yes, they got a big benefit out of it, but they're not so far off or they're not competing for some high level thing. So it's less noticeable. But I think in the same token, and Tim, really what I'm doing is talking myself into bringing in a PEMF device into my clinic.
He's almost there.
I'm already like, I compare this with the oxygen therapy,
I
the
could
red
do
light.
all of this.
We could rock somebody's world, you know?
Yeah. But see, like, so
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think you had mentioned HBOT in another discussion, Tom. And when people pair it with that, you use it if you put yourself with a PEMF, it opens up the body. Now you put them in the HBOT, you've got the pressurized, more oxygen-rich environment, and now it gets in there and takes better effect. People are seeing,
Tim,
magnitude better level type of.
I switched for compliance and ease of use. I switched to an EWAT machine, so exercise with oxygen therapy. Okay. And I'm thinking of a circuit where they do what's the typical protocol on a PEMF mat, like 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. All right. And then 15 to 20 minutes on the exercise with oxygen, and then right into the red light. So now not only are we increasing the space between the cells, we're saturating them with oxygen, and then we're, hitting the red light there to stimulate the mitochondria to start producing more energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, I'm glad you keyed that one, because
this is all Chinese medicine in my head too, Tim. Which
is
right. Like insane.
But what about mitochondria, right? There's a thing that's called the ATP, adenosine triphosphate, the basic engines of energy. And that people run around taking ATP supplements and help out. But yes, PEMF has been shown to sometimes, in some cases, double-digit wise, improve the production of that ATP, the level.
Now, is that at like initial usage, or is that like chronic usage?
Now, I'm glad you went down that path, man. That's even at initial usage. But what you get with PEMF, right, is sometimes if I say I'm charging, based with the kind of body electrical, if I'm trying to charge up my car battery that's dead, I'm putting that, the recharge stuff right in there from the start. But is it enough to bring back enough to start the car? No. But you get that immediate benefit, but you got to charge it up for a few hours or what have you. So the PEMF, you will get immediate benefits. Those things happen, but then you get cumulative and progressive results with it over time.
Yeah, this is that the difference. Even so every service we do in our office, it's not a one and done kind of thing, and I think a lot of people don't realize that these therapeutic devices. Look, you don't just get on it once and get off, and you're 20 years younger, and your leaky gut's fixed, and your limp's gone, and you look better. All of that,
does it take away my gray hair too? Is that
will it grow hair?
But you know what, Tim? Like I don't know how deep we want to dive at all into this, but you and I had talked offline about a study or a little experiment you guys ran with recovery protocols, and you designing that recovery, which was PEMF based, was designed that way. And this is a callback to something Tom said earlier about study design. You guys were able to not only give some pretty compelling evidence that it did in fact help in recovery, but you guys were able to do that because you know what the fuck you're doing, and you made an experiment with a cohort that made sense, right? Like what we don't know about these studies oftentimes, and Tom's much better at this than I am, but reading all the nitty gritty stuff, like I read the meta-analysis and I'm kind of done. Like I gloss over after that. Right. But like Tom could read in and say, oh, this N is
look,
like
I do that with 10 tabs open, to be fair. I'm like, what the fuck is that pathway?
But
I need to read what that is first.
But my point is that like, you don't know how good of a study designer this idiot is who put this thing together. So, like you can't, at face value, you can't just patently say, okay, PEMF didn't work because this study says no. We're like, well, did you make it so it had a chance of work? I mean, like, I don't know the answers, but I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about that one in particular, but like in general, you know what you're doing. right?
Yeah.
And like, so your outcome was far more trustworthy in my mind
Right.
because of that.
So I agree with you. The study design has to be good, and that's why I like PubMed, that stuff. Where they will look at, but even that one, that's where I saw the one where I knew the guy had just used a different protocol, and I should have talked to somebody who kind of knew what they were doing, and said, "Let now try this and test it out." But yeah, so it gets back to I was working with. So there's a once someone's been accepted to try out for the SEALs, they're often encouraged to go get into a preparatory program to increase their odds of being able to pass the courses. So that's the level I was working with. They're very good athletes, they're accepted to try out. And the guy had wanted to, who ran the program, wanted to, was looking at getting a device to help in that training, but his sponsors would have to pay for it. So he wanted to give them real data that says this is helping these people and it's worth you putting some more money into it. So we did a number of tests with it. One was he did have what's called his Furious 5, which was how many sit-ups, body weight squats, and push-ups could they do in 5 minutes with his counting of it. And we did that with a group of 10 people. After they went through that first round, we then said, okay, 9 of you go do your normal recovery session. 1, we're going to give a PEMF recovery session. Take it down to low intensity to really help get the lactic acid out, help them recover. This one we did it was an 8-minute one. Threw them back in and said, do it again. The 9 that did their normal recovery, walk around, lay down, drink electrolytes, what have you, none of them could do as many as they did the first time after 8 minutes. The person that we gave the PMF recovery session to did 80 more, which was a 33% improvement. And he had already exerted the most effort the first time through. So that was a big difference. We did a similar one where they were swimming the length of a swimming pool of Olympic length, was that 50 meters.
50 meters.
And you make them do 4 rounds. They swim down and they do sliding push-ups back, and they'd swim around on that. There were 6 of them. And we did the same. This time we took the person who finished last. So someone couldn't say, well, that person was in great shape anyway, they would recover. And this guy was really, really dragging it. That person, and they threw him back in, that person went from 6th place to 2nd place on that second round. And the only one he didn't beat on that second round was the instructor for that session, who was I forgot to mention, these guys do this fully clothed. And so the only one he didn't beat was the instructor, and that instructor was swimming in his Speedos and was a world-class open water swimmer. And so people looked at him and said, where'd you come from? Where do you do this? And so those were 2 parts of that. We did other kind of studies with that group and tests. And so they got one, they brought it in and thought it helped the training tremendously.
And those are all very different applications than acute injuries or health and longevity sort of prophylactic use of these things. Just, you want to talk a minute about like, is it a protocol difference? Is it an intensity difference? Is it all of the above difference? Like how do these things sort of, how is the way we think about PMF change depending on what we're actually trying to do?
Can you repeat the last part of that, Matt?
So if I'm an athlete, I'm going to use PMF and I'm going to think about it, approach it from one way. If I just want to live forever, I'm going to use it a different way altogether. Like how do we think about and use this technology differently depending on which way I'm coming
So
at?
it is, and that's a good point. I like to say it is good for healing, is good for wellness. What's the difference between, to me, healing, you might be treating a disease, and you're just in the disease state. Wellness is thriving. Is how much can you thrive even if you have a disease? How much can you avoid? Is a preventative. So it is good for healing, for wellness, than it is for performance, and you do use it differently. You take that we were just talking about. An athlete going out might do a higher intensity to kind of rev things up and charge them up before they compete. Afterwards, they'll use a lower intensity to bring them down, calm down the system, get lactic acid out. That's the thing. Doing it for general wellness, you want consistency, and you just really want it to work the body, stimulate different molecules in the body, different levels. So that's just a certain stimulation program. The healing is just a range of things from the healing range of ways. If it's for example, if it's a near-term injury, soft tissue type of thing, but it's happened in the past 2 or 3 weeks, you can put it on some real high intensity and drive some very fast things, even if it's been a year or less, by doing some work on that. I'll give you an example of that. I was working with a collegiate track athlete who had I can't remember if it was a torn ligament or a torn tendon, but had been working rehab. Insurance wouldn't cover the PRP, which platelet-rich plasma replacement type of thing, little self-stem cell. So it wouldn't cover that. He didn't want to get operated on to sew it up, so he was trying to just work heal through PT. Been about a year. I had him on PEMF for just a week, and when he was working with PT, and his doctor said wasn't enough strength in there, didn't show enough healing. And then just a week, maybe 2 weeks, week and a half, I think it was, about 3 to 5 sessions. I worked with him on high intensity for about an hour each time I saw him. He went back to that PT and his doctor and got physically cleared. Said there was enough strength in there to go back and compete on that. So it can be used, and so it depends on what you're trying to drive there. I know I've got my wife using it now we talked about for bone support there. And so that's a different intensity, but consistency at least 3 times a week on that. But so yes, there's a lot of different ways where you're driving that healing in the soft tissues. That's a certain way, and whether or not that injury is new or old. Like if it's older, Tom, with all the work he does, probably has a nice, better term for this than I do. But if it's, you gotta be careful when you're old, when it's older, because you're stimulating things that are kind of dead. You bring those back to life, and they start talking to each other. You can often cause not damage, but you can give more discomfort than they want.
We call this a healing crisis. We call this a healing crisis, where it's like, I did something really good for you.
Yeah.
But it was a little bit too much for you where you were at. And, if you can kind of preload that, if the patient's aware of that, but sometimes I also think you placebo that into them. Yeah. So it's this judgy thing where you're like, oh, do I tell them they might feel like crap after this?
Right.
But it's so interesting to me because it sounds like, and you correct me if I'm wrong here, that there's different frequencies within this for different conditions. And is that because of the resonance of the tissue you're going towards? I don't know how to describe that.
Well, there are some PEMF devices that vary a lot in frequencies, different ones.
Okay.
I have that in there because they want to stimulate a certain range of things in there. But what I would say on others, the frequency might be the same, but it's like the intensity. I think of the frequency is like the song.
Yeah.
And the intensity is like the volume. So it's parameters. Even when the frequency is the same, it is the intent. So it's the intensity and the duration that you change as well. All those factors you kind of work with.
And I was going to actually ask a question about duration. I know when we've heard and talked about this treatment with injuries, right? Mm-hmm. Something that you want to go away very fast, usually, nobody wants to be hurt. I've seen people use it several times a day, right? Yeah. And it feels like that's okay. Is there is there too much of this? Is this something that you can't, you got to be careful with dosage on this, because you are dealing with the frequency.
After that piggybacks on that. So please.
There's a range of PEMF things, the low frequency, the high frequency things. So may vary a little bit in that, but especially at the low frequency where I like to stay, and I think it's very good, very therapeutic effect. You're not going to hurt. You're not going to hurt anybody. It's not going to really cause. They're not going to develop cancer. They're not going to have even nosebleeds or anything of that nature. Could, like Tom and I were talking, could you fire some things up, or maybe they might get a little nauseated because the metabolic waste is getting out faster than their body can get out, or could you cause the communication up and down the spine to come back together quickly and drive? Yes, in that nature, but you're not going to do that. That's not harming them, and it's actually showing that it's working with them. So, to your question though, where it varies, it gets back to that tweaking of it. The basic concepts of PEMF, very easy. The expertise level to use it for various things, that's where you develop, through your usage and talking to people.
A little bit more art than science there.
Right.
So, like an injury, I had a senior women's tennis player that had a severely sprained ankle, couldn't even stand up on it. I took her in for a day, this day, and I did high intensity, low frequency, high intensity, low frequency for an hour straight. She called me up the next day and said, what'd you do to me? This was voodoo. I said, why? She said, I'm back. I know it would take me 2 weeks to recover from this level of sprain. I'm up at 95%. I could practice beautifully on this thing, and she ran a gym, and so she actually bought one to bring into her gym and use. But then you get somebody that's like me, the old wrestler, a thing of that nature, with my ripped up knees. I'm not going to start cranking it that high, that start. I'm going to bring it back slowly to do some things. So it depends on. One, it depends how quickly somebody needs to get back in action. Depends on the age of the injury, because that's how much damage and how much deterioration set in, and you kind of work your art with it.
All right. Yeah. So with that, contraindications with like pacemakers. What if somebody has metal in their body, screws, rods, bolts?
The FDA now is asking that implanted device not to use with pacemakers.
Yeah.
I will say that many other countries are okay with it. And if someone sees their physician and describes, here's the intensity range, what's called the flux intensity, I think flux intensity range, and takes that forward to their cardiologist or interventional cardiologist who put the pacemaker in, I would encourage people to take a look at that. There are other things like the defibrillators and the pain medication pumps and things of that nature to say don't use it with that, because there is a danger that the frequencies could interfere and shut them off. And I was talking with one. I spend about 80% of my time working with doctors to get adoption of PEMF for better outcomes for their patients. And one doctor said to me, that makes a lot of sense, because I put somebody in the MRI. It does shut those things down, but there's supposed to be a way for them to reboot. So on that. But and then there is something that says don't use it with people who have had organ transplants.
I was just going to ask about that, actually. What was that?
That's an interesting one.
Because there's a concern. Part of what PEMF does is boost the immune system and strengthen the immune system.
And you're on immunosuppressive therapy.
Therapy. So there's a thinking that it could raise the odds of that type of thing.
Like a rejection type situation. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. And just you were talking about treating that woman for an hour. I mean, I joke about my first time with PEMF. Right. I'm laying naked on a prototype table, like in a room, like on this table. It was at Tom's clinic. And Tom and this guy are outside talking, and I'm in there, and I'm convulsing on a table because it's like this PEMF machine designed for horses. Coil. Yeah, and I'm flopping around like a fried egg on a griddle, right? And then all of a sudden, I pass out. Like I'm not from pain or anything, but I found it so relaxing that I actually just passed out. I woke up about 40 minutes later, and a rotator cuff issue that I'd had for a couple years was like gone, and that was pre-COVID, so we're talking at least 5-6 years ago at this point, and I have never had it come back. And it was one of those things where I mean, I don't know what the intensity of this thing was, but it was made for a horse, and I had it on almost full. We had it on almost full, so it was way, way high up there.
Like you get a group of guys together, they're going to do something.
Yeah.
Like, who can tolerate
the guy
the
who
most?
put me on that, the guy who put me on that said, how squirmish are you about this? And I was like, not at all. Why? He's like, well, this is a little bit intense, And he had it like, I think a week before at a seminar we were at, and he was walking around with the coil, with the generator like next to him. And you would just throw this coil and he'd put it around your neck and your whole body would do one of these sort of like convulsing things. But everybody unilaterally, after about 4 seconds of like getting over the thump part, was like, "Oh, this is kind of neat."
You think seeing it that it's like you get a shock, but it's nothing. It's nothing like that.
Right.
I don't even know how to describe it.
And I found it, and that was where my sort of mythical relationship with PEMF started, because like the day after I woke up from that table experience, and the next day when I'm like sitting there in the shower going, holy fuck, I cannot believe my shoulder is like amazing right now. Like, and it's like you lived with this for so long that you just almost like wrote off even being normal ever again. You're like, no, I guess this is just how it goes. I can lift my arm to here and that's about it. And I talked to my doctor and he was like, yeah, this is what happens when, I was over 40. And he's like, that's what happens when guys over 40 rock climb. They get hurt. And I was like, well, that checks. I mean, that makes sense, right? Like, I mean, but then afterwards, I'm like, no, that's not true at all. Like, this absolutely does not need to be the reality that you succumb to.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you on that. My religious philosophy, and I think what I see from medical science, so people should live to be 100, 120. I can do that. And so therefore, 40
I mean, that's the magic number everybody likes to zero in on.
Well, until somebody hits 120, they go, I could go for another 10.
Yeah, I could go for another. Yeah. I could just keep going. Well, I mean, now you talk to
going.
You could talk to Sinclair, and he's like, I don't know, 150 seems rational, and I'm like, yep. So to your point, Tom, he's already
the person that crosses the 200 line.
Yeah, right. They're just it's like running a 4-minute mile. It's a bunch of people just running out there trying to see how fast.
One person breaks it, and then all of a sudden we got this whole, I don't even know the word for 200 generians.
Yeah.
But to your other point now, Matt, as we were talking about one time, I've got a buddy who's a Hall of Fame martial artist, the external style, Taekwondo, and he loves that feeling. So you probably have 5,000 people now listening saying, I want to run out and feel that. But then there's 10,000 that say, I don't want to go through that. So
that would have turned everybody off. Everybody I know not in this sphere would have never done
that specific event. Yeah. Everyone there was like, mess me up, man.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's a very niche group. We got to remember that we're not normal.
Yeah. And I'll remind you, Tom, that I was doing that with needles in both ears because I was getting the ear acupuncture.
Did I do that?
No, it wasn't you. It was
they had the other. They had the other. Oh, they had what's her name there? Yeah.
So I'm like, well, while the needles are doing their thing, what's this rope thing I could tie around my neck and convulse like a?
Remember that one guest that said, "You biohackers, man,
you
got to combine everything," and I'm like, I don't like that word, and he's like, Tim, it doesn't matter, you're doing it.
We don't need to go too far back, but we had a guest on recently talking about scalar energy, and he also referenced Tesla's work. And I think it was interesting. And I guess I just, maybe there's a soundbite on this we can get. But when you're talking about fields in general and that sort of ability for your body to just quote unquote understand the language, right? Like it understands the words coming at you. I mean, I think there's a lot there that we just discount because we don't fully understand it and we don't ask better questions. But
it's less substantial and harder to study, I think, is the issue from a Western research type perspective.
Right. Absolutely.
But like you that language that your body's recognizing, I mean, has anybody really tried to dive in and figure out why it does understand that language so fluently? I'm just curious.
Yeah, there's a naturopathic guy that I talked to, and he has, but frankly, I can't recapture what he said that explains it. But on a basic level, it's just two things about that. Let's say one is that a vibration. It is a vibration. I don't want to. I'm originally a Central Nebraskan, and so Central Nebraskan, we don't really get into that kind of esoteric things and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to do some of this portion. I can still hear my childhood buddy saying, "You've gone crazy, Tim." But some of it is like the vibrational. You've got that stimulation, your vibration, and you've got that passing through to each other. Then the other part where you look at it is because cells talk to each other, they communicate with each other. So you've got that magnetism, that one vibration coming in, and thing people can understand is to think about if you listen to music and you crank up the old heavy metal, acid rock, whatever the new term for that is, that's outside, but your eardrum starts vibrating and understanding that and responding to it, and that's a very good thing. Wow, that's just passed through the air, yet your mind understands what's happening there, goes through. And it's the same thing as that. Same thing as a dog whistle, right? We don't hear it, but the dog does and can respond to it. So it's at a level of communication and frequency that we're not audible to our ears, but it's still audible to our body, and that's a response. And then it just triggers off a whole kind of chemical reaction. And so people
fascinating
have
stuff.
Looked at that, but I could probably explain it better than I did at that point, but that's
no. I mean, it's just fascinating. And I guess I have an infinite number of questions on this. I know we're going to have to just wrap it up at some point here. So it's like one of those things, like the longer you talk about it, the more you're like, well, what about this? What about this?
Yeah.
Like,
and you start seeing applications and connections to other technology and health products,
Absolutely. Hey, well, you two are so much fun. I'll come back every week.
Oh, we'd love to have you back, man.
I love this show because we get to talk to some of the coolest people ever. Yeah. And I never would have. Well, Tim and I are actually in a group together, so we do have proximity to one another. So Tim doesn't count in this statement, but most people, I wouldn't even have proximity to some of these people that we get to talk to have conversations about this. And I just think it's a true testament to like, hey man, if you just really like something and you just start telling enough people about it, people who also like it find you, right? Like they just start coming your way, and that's where we're at now.
Frequencies and resonance.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and it's even funnier because you're now the second or third guest after our Scalar guest, for example, that actually is talking about similar things, albeit in different directions. Mm-hmm. But you would have asked me 6 months ago, what is scalar energy? I'd have been like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I think I might be able to piece this together just because I'm a bit of a logophile and I can kind of put root of words together. I probably would have gotten, but past that, I had no idea. And I certainly didn't know that like Tesla was basically berated for coming up with some of this stuff, because they were like, listen, you're a pretty smart guy. You got to stop because this makes you look crazy. So
he did die penniless.
Yeah, right. So it's interesting to talk to people and just sort of Venn diagram all this stuff. And then that's the last piece on my soapbox on that is when you do get to talk to enough people, you realize that the Venn diagram of health in general is extreme. That football in the middle is gigantic, much bigger than any of the other circles, right? Like, and what it is a shit ton of these little slivers that sit outside that football in the middle. But like being healthy, I know Tom and I've talked about this a million times if we've talked about it once. There isn't a silver bullet. There's a silver bullet sometimes for an acute injury or something that's afflicting you, but not to stay healthy, right? Like there's no silver bullet
health,
for that.
No.
But
I could take an aspirin because I got a headache,
right?
But
I'm with it. It's to me, it's kind of some of the things I do as a wellness plan manager with people. It is a comprehensive approach. It's do you use something like PEMF as foundational? It can buy you some time and cover some bad habits. But if you really want to approach it, then you got to talk about everything from how do you minimize toxins in your environment and keep that out. It's how are you eating? How are you exercising? And are you adjusting your exercise by age? Even not so much like your doctor said you can't do this at age 40, but it's a matter of at age 40 my collagen production has gone down, so maybe I ought to do something. Maybe I ought to change the way that I strengthen those joints. Maybe I ought to look at a collagen supplement. And so,
or maybe you got to look at red light therapy. You know what I mean? Like, and that's, you know, like, and that's
what's going to rock my world. Yeah.
Right. And that's where I think that's where I think keeping an open mind about this is as much important part of the equation as choosing the technology to adopt. Obviously, these things are not free, right? My red light thing is definitely not free. Juve sells these panels for $6,000 a pop. Like, you know, I've got a sauna that's also not free. I know that saunas are wildly variable. You can go way up in price on those. I'm even seeing cold dip tanks now with like UV and charcoal filters and stuff. They're like 15, 20 grand to sit in a bucket of ice. You know,
look, man, I gotta say, I bought the cheap inflatable one for home, and I got the high end one for the office, and they both get you cold.
Yeah. Right. But if you want to do it every day, there is something about the fancy version where you get in and it's exactly controlled.
You don't have to go, oh shit, I don't have enough ice.
Right, exactly. Right. You're like, well, I guess 64 is the temp for today. And so like,
mine's black. It's sitting on the outside in 95-degree sunshine right now. I don't care how much ice I'm putting in it. It's still a hot tub.
Yeah, right. Yeah, right. Yeah. That's also true. So cool, Tim. Listen, man, where do we find you? Let's send people. I know Tom's flashed your stuff up here a couple times. Tim at wellnesswaveclub.com, I think, is where we keep going. And I know wellnesswaveclub.com is a place people can find you. It's, as you said before the show, it's not maybe everything PMF related, but just in a general rule, it is more of your overall approach, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah, they'll find the overall approach to their kind of wellness management. There's a little white paper on PMF there. I think it's in the resources section that I encourage people to kind of pull down and take a look at. But that's my email, and they can certainly reach out via email for a chat. And then my YouTube has up there a lot of free advice on aging well and healthily, and that a couple of things, and some what I call wellness snacks, as well as some sort of videos that we've done on various topics up there, from pain, stress, from stress relief to getting rid of toxins in your bodies and things of that nature.
Love it, man. Well, listen, thank you again so much. I really appreciate the time. I love learning. I love this topic a lot, so I'm glad to kind of illuminate this a little bit more for me. I learn something new every time I have the conversation. So
this is great.
Pleasure to be here with you. Enjoyed it, and got you doing great work there.
I appreciate that. So have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.